Welcome to Confessions Beyond the Food. I'm your host, Nancy Redlin. Let's dig in and get inspired. Hi, welcome back to Confessions Beyond the Food, where we go beyond the kitchen and into the heart of what really matters. Today's conversation, we welcome back a guest that's been with us, John Franke, founder of Franke Culinary Consulting, a chef, leader, and mentor who spent decades shaping teams and building brands in the food industry. But what I love about this episode is where John takes the conversation, not just about success or strategy, but about priorities. For him, it's simple, but very powerful. God first, family second, work third. We talk about what it looks like to actually live that out, especially in an industry that often flips that order upside down. John shares how faith guides his decisions, how he stays grounded when the chaos hits, and what surrender really looks like when things don't go as planned. It's a conversation about faith, balance, and purpose, and I think it'll speak to anyone trying to keep what matters most at the center. So let's jump in. Here's my conversation with my good friend, John Franke. Welcome.
Thanks.
Glad to have you on. So let's get started. So you have been in the game in the food service world for a long time. Chef, leader, now consultant. So how has your faith shifted or grown through all these seasons?
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey. You know, if you go back when I got saved, I was a chef, and that was a bit of an interesting pill to swallow for a lot of people who had been around me and heard my voice and my words come out and didn't really believe that I could be such a new person. Then went on to be a missionary in Africa and then came back and had my moments, right? My ups and downs of being that Christian person that I could be in the business place, but then also holding people accountable, also getting fired up sometimes, and where, I'd go from saying like, oh my gosh, I wish we could do this better, to being like, you better do it, and so many people that would maybe listen to this or run into me today, they go, there's absolutely no way that you're a Christian, then. And so my goal nowadays is to make sure that there isn't a question about that. And that does not mean that I have to go and throw a Bible in somebody's face. I just, in my actions and my words and my sort of how I carry myself should be in a more professional, mature, gracious way that I think people would say, what is that? What is it about him that's a little bit different? So over the years, the biggest challenge of being a chef has been, and being a Christian, is what I just mentioned. They were sort of going through the steps of what is holding somebody accountable and what is being a Christian, right? So somebody's consecutively late, or they're doing just a really bad job, or they have a bad attitude. Generally, you wouldn't go up and go, well, let's talk about it. We'll go to church with me and maybe your attitude will change. It's kind of like, you're fired, get out. We'll do it somebody else. So not a real good representation of Christianity. But again, you're in the workplace. So it's like, I've never known how to sort of balance that. As a leader, it was always challenging because for the same reasons, and people would come to me for advice. And then you had to weigh, well, how much advice should be Christian slanted and how much advice should just be sort of worldly or professional advice. And learning how to sort of balance that a little bit. And then nowadays as a consultant, it's much easier because it's my business. And I trust God way more than I used to. I put him first way more than I used to. And I understand how to do that, and what that means to me anyway. And so again, it doesn't mean that I walk into every first meeting, any meeting, with a Bible. I don't quote scriptures to people, but what I do try to do is I right up front sort of say, hey, look, something that's important to me is my faith. Something important to me is my family. And, those two things are paramount over everything else. And I don't ever really have to do this. I don't have to say it. I can just act on it. I'm not going to answer your call on a Sunday. I'm not going to answer your call late Saturday night. I'm not going to maybe even answer it on a Thursday, at 7:30 if I'm having dinner with my family. So all those things don't necessarily portray me as a Christian, but helps, me sort of lay some boundaries around what I'm doing. And then if somebody were to say, hey, again, never happened yet, but like, hey, you didn't answer my email on Sunday. I'm not like, oh, I'm taking a Sabbath. I can't. It's just like, okay, I didn't, but the reason was I was at church that morning, and I think it's a good opportunity then to talk to somebody about it, right? But it's been a challenge all the way through, and I think it's probably easier in some industries than other industries to sort of put on this Christian cloak, if you will, and walk around. But at least in consulting, and I don't know that it's just so much consulting that's made it easier as much as the refocusing and reprioritizing my life around what's the most important thing, which again is God, and then my family, and then consulting, right? Not work is first. My family maybe is kind of second or third, and God's kind of pressed down there, and I'll see him on Sunday. So.
It's a really hard thing to do,
Yeah.
Especially when you have deadlines. The industry is fast paced. So that's definitely challenging.
Absolutely.
But I think once people start seeing, if you live out your priorities, again, I feel like it sets you apart, and that they're like, wow, look at how he is doing this, and like you said, ask more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you able to do that, and why? So I think that's a really great example you can set for lots of different restaurants that you're consulting with and the people that work there. And so that's awesome. So what does it look like for you to really put God first in your work, especially in a business where it's easy to get caught up in results and reputation, kind of what we were just talking about?
Yeah. I think it's tough. I think it's tough to say, it's easy to say I put God first, and then it's sort of, but it's not so easy to articulate that. And what does that mean? Right. So I think, in terms of like a reputation, the way I look at that is I have a reputation for those around me, or the way people look at me. And that is not as important to me anymore as how God views me. What is my reputation with God? When I die and I go, to the pearly gates, what am I going to have to answer to? And so always remembering that, I don't live every day in fear of dying and what's going to happen when I get to heaven. I just want to live in confidence that God's got my back, and that, I'm going to do the best I can for him. But I think in terms of the day to day, it's not easy in the industry to, exemplify that. And like I said, put on that cloak. But it's something you have to do. And I think, that the biggest thing is in terms of putting him first, and the way that I demonstrate that today, when somebody says, well, what does that mean? And I've had that question people pose, like, well, what does that mean, putting God first? It means like what, like every day you go to church? It's like, well, no, what it is that what I'm doing is I'm, remembering that everything that's provided for me and every moment of every day is God-centered, and that, the situation that I'm embraced with, how am I going to handle that? What is my reputation to God going to be? So I'm invited to come into a meeting. I'm invited to come in and help fix a brand. How am I going to handle myself? What is it going to be? The most professional way? Is it going to be, again, gracious, loving, or is it going to be really crass and hateful or something, right? And even from a professional standpoint, Christian or not, the second one's bad. But the point is that I'm doing it with an anchor in, not because what's most professional, but more so what is more godly. And that, like, just driving here today, like noticing that God created the trees, the birds, the sky, the clouds, like that. If I can see God in everything, that's a way for me to put God first. That when I wake up, he's the first thing I think about, and the first person I talk, first, entity I talk to, right? Jesus is the first person I speak to. So, remembering that, giving thanks to him every day for everything, my kids, good or bad, whatever they've done, thanking him for my marriage, thanking him for my family, thanking him for just anything and everything, and that always remembering even more so that yes, he's provided all these things, or he's, created all these things, that he's also provided for me. A word that I like to use when I do talk about this occasionally is enough. Like God always provides enough. Like if enough for me, is, $10 to get through today, then that's provided enough in terms of that financial enough, right? Now, I need more than $10 a day, but as an example, some people may only need, when I was a missionary in Africa, $1 a day was kind of sufficient. That was the enough, maybe for, somebody like Jeff Bezos, $1 million a day is enough, right? So what is your enough? And then if you zero in on that you remember that God provided it all. And so if he provided enough for you, then he must provide enough time, enough patience, enough finances, enough grace to get you through that day. And then tomorrow comes and he'll provide enough again. And so just sort of always remembering that. So to help me be less frustrated if I'm speaking with somebody, whether that be a family member, a kid, a wife, or a client, just be like, life isn't this tough. Life isn't so one-sided. There's always two sides to every story, and let me hear both, and God's going to provide the patience that I need to help listen and to hear what's happening.
That's amazing. The spirit of gratitude. I think I read that recently in one of my devotionals, and just having that mindset going through the day. And some days it's hard to find something to be grateful for. I mean, if you're hit with something really awful and tragic, and so there's a God that's here to comfort us. And so, and mourns with us and holds us during that time. So, gratitude is such a great thing. Another thing that I love what you said is that you're not judging yourself on what man thinks. And I struggle with this as being a salesperson, is just needing man's approval, and performance, and what this industry thinks about me. If we lose a contract, or what do they think of me? And somebody gave me this analogy that there's a throne, and it's like, who's on the throne, Nancy? Is it God, or is it the industry? Is it, whatever it is, even good, it's not a bad thing, that I love this industry. It's not a bad thing that I love my family. But if I'm putting them on the throne, then, I've kind of got it wrong. I'm not rooted really and anchored.
Yeah. So, I agree with that. And I think that's that enough, right? So like you lose a client, you lose a customer, you lose a line of, plateware. It's that the belief that God will provide enough. And I have, said, not directly to any client, but jokingly to some friends who are clients. And then I say it every day to myself is, let's say I put out a proposal and I think I'm going to get this gig, whatever it is, and it's X amount of dollars. And then I don't put all my weight on that. I say, this is a client that called me out of nowhere, and I am giving them a proposal for X amount of dollars. And if they take it, that means it was meant to be. And if they don't take it, God's got my back. He's going to provide enough, so he'll backfill it with another client. I'm never worried. And I use that word never. Like I am probably once in a while thinking too much about it. Most of the time I have to remind myself constantly, but that God is always there to provide. And I think that the more that I say that, and the more that I believe that, and the more that I believe that, not just with like a client, not just because it's a proposal that's X amount of dollars, but it's with my family. Like God's provided enough patience, enough finances. He's provided enough to my kids to put them in the right situations. He's provided enough to my wife to get her the happiness that she deserves and needs. And if the more that I say that and the more that I believe that the real test, like you just said, the real test is, what if something goes wrong? Right. So if I keep saying that, and not just saying it to like put it out in the atmosphere, but like I literally believe that when something does happen, God forbid, like something happens to a child, to my wife, to family, anything like that, that now the true test is, what will happen? Will I live that, or will I go, it's all God's fault. I can't believe that he did this to me. And I truly believe that I have the faith at this point in my life that there's a bigger story. There's a bigger purpose, and that myself and my needs and my love for different people, are important to me, but it's not the grand plan. And so if I can live through something that happens that's pretty bad, or really bad, that will really show me that my faith is where I think it is. I don't want to be put to that test, but if I am someday, I'm hopeful that, I'll live up to that.
Yeah, you're rooted in truth. And I think the everyday work towards, inviting God into our lives and building that relationship, it's like with any friendship. The more you spend time with them, the more you love them and you trust them. It goes the same for God. And so, and when those hard times do come, you're not just blown away by circumstance. So that's awesome. So was there ever a moment where your faith had to lead? Maybe it didn't even make sense from a business standpoint.
Yes. So a lot of people have these like, COVID changed me, blah, blah, blah. And for me, it wasn't necessarily COVID, but it was during that time period where it seemed like everything was coming at me. It was a lot of turmoil with my wife and I, a lot of turmoil with my kids who are getting older. And, I have 2 kids from my first marriage, 2 kids from my second, and like how that all kind of worked together. And a lot was kind of happening. And whether or not that was because we were all stuck in the same house, I don't know, but that was the time frame right there. And I just was like, something's got to give, right? I mean, it was just like, everything seemed to be falling apart. And then of course I didn't have work. I was a consultant by that point. But the few clients I had at that moment, stopped working, right? It's like, we're not doing anything. Our restaurants are closed at the moment. And so I had nothing to do. I didn't have a work to escape to, cause where I had been prior, they were all, busy doing to-go package, all this stuff. Everybody was like working for half the price and half the salary and busting their butts to do everything. And so it was really where I dug in. I said, I got to find some help, and found a Christian therapist. And like, that was like the catalyst to see God do something, to say, if you will submit to me, if you will lay down and say, you can't control it anymore. Like I got to the point where like I couldn't control the narrative anymore with my wife, with my kids, with, my ex-wife, like nothing. I was out of sorts in a sense. Right. And by talking to a therapist and being like, okay, here's where I'm at. Like, it's just like chaos. Right. And to kind of bring those things together and smooth them out, and then God be along that ride. It wasn't just like, okay, here's the systematic scientific way to do this. It was like, you have got to lay down. You have got to find out what the root causes are. This is, where is God in this place? And that's when I was like, I don't really even put God in the equation. He was not really part of the deal. It's like, yeah, he's in the back seat. And that was a time where I started to see true transformation, like crazy transformation. And what I realized is that like I was doing a good job of blaming sort of everybody else for my issues and my problems, and why things weren't working. And when I realized, I was like, oh, whoops, it's me and what I need to do better, what God is opening my eyes to. And it's been a journey. I mean, that was 5 years ago. I mean, it was probably 2 to 3 years of work. Right. And that's what I think is so great about God, is that if he needs to, do a miracle, he'll do it. But a lot of what I see is that it's time and effort and patience and fortitude to get you to the point where God says, all right, you are really in this. It's not like I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to like guide you and open the doors for you and pass you through. And so it was just like this nice building, and there was, ups and downs as it went up the trail. But like the last, let's say 2.5 years, I mean, it's just been like, I have nothing to complain about. It's been great. Yeah. So
that's awesome. I mean, 1 degree, even if you just go 1 degree a day, I mean, it can really
there's something to be said for that, for sure. So,
well, so let's get real. The industry can chew you up if you let it.
Yeah.
How do you stay grounded and keep your faith steady in all the chaos?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned that earlier, just like seeing him in all things, remembering that God's there, no matter what happens, good or bad. That if it's a new client, if it's a client that I haven't heard from in a while, if it's something to do with my family, if it's something to do with friends or ex-coworkers, whatever it is, that God has orchestrated this whole entire thing. And I think that's what keeps me grounded all the time. And that, one thing I came to terms with more from a professional level, and it really rings from a spiritual level, is that when I was running the food service of a very large company and all these different brands and all these different chefs, and I sort of self-perpetuated work, right? Because what I didn't want to do is be at home. Like, that seemed too chaotic to me. So, but I get praise at work. Let me go to work. And so what I realized is opening restaurants and writing recipes and whatever else I was doing, leading teams, that I felt I was the only one who could do it. Like, I was it. I was the center of this entire thing. And without me, the whole thing will crumble. And what I learned to do then moving forward in a consulting capacity is realize, oh my gosh, I'm not the only person that can open a restaurant. I'm not the only person that can lead a team. I am not as important as I thought I was, and that was freeing for a lot of reasons. And so it's just a way that I have sort of re-looked at life to say, God really is in the center of all of it. He's the one that we can't live without. So I almost was like, I guess in a lot of ways, looking at myself as like some sort of God-like person that could do no wrong, that could be the only person, the omnipotent one that can run this restaurant. And then when I was able to walk away and go, oh, they're still doing good sales. Things are still happening. Maybe it's not as perfect as I would have liked, but it's still going well. And so I've learned that. And I've learned that with my family that, we've got to be collaborative in our decisions together as a husband and wife, and even involving our kids in decisions that, hey, do you want to do this? And not a big decision, like you want to move to New York City, right? Like, well, I guess that you should ask them that, but, but like just trying to be communicative with everybody and be open and transparent with them. And so trying to make not like it's me, I'm the one, so.
Yeah. It's hard to give up control.
Yes, it is hard.
I mean, and just even the everyday, it's really hard. I actually have a verse in my car that reminds me that it's not about me. And so it's hard
to remember that.
Yeah, it is. And because typically when you do start to control things, your anxiety, my anxiety starts because I put all this pressure on myself. And so, it's just kind of a reminder of like, hey, you're not in control and you've got to look up instead of like trying to always look inward.
Yeah. And the more that you allow yourself to believe you're the only one in control, the harder it gets. And the harder it is to get out of that frame of mind. And that's what I have found. I'm not a perfect specimen by any stretch of the imagination. I still have my moments. But, again, verbalizing it, speaking out about it helps put it in front of me to say, now I'm holding myself accountable to this expectation, whether that's something bad that happens, like I mentioned earlier, or something like this, where it's like, I'm saying that I'm not really the center of it. Well, I have to believe that. I have to, I have to live by what I'm saying.
Right. So let's see. So when things don't go your way, a project falls apart or doors closed, how do you practice surrender and trust that God still got it? What are some practical steps?
So I think practically is what I mentioned earlier is just believing that he's got it under control, that there's no reason for nothing really falls apart. Nothing really goes wrong. It's just something has turned a different direction. So if, you're driving along on a highway and God's with you in that car and you're good to go, and you end up on the frontage road or you end up taking a detour, that doesn't mean that God's not there, that God's still there, right? It's like he's still part of this event that's happened in your life. And I think, a great example of that is, I was a missionary in Africa, and there was a time when we would get money for each month our supporters would send. And there was one of the months where we had run it down to like 50 cents, like no joke. And get in a taxi cab to drive either to the ATM to get our the next month's, thing was coming, or to go downtown, which is another couple miles to go grocery shopping. That's the same amount of money in the taxi cab, which is the way they did it. And it was 400 franc at the time. It's like, I don't know, 40, 50 cents, something. It was like whatever we had was 400 franc. That's all I have, like 200 coins. And so we gave it to the guy and we said, well, we're just going to go to the ATM. It's like a mile up. And then from there, we'll have money. We'll give the next taxi driver some money and go to the grocery store. So we get to the ATM machine. We're out of money and the ATM machine's broken. And I was like, literally the first time in my life where I've been out of money completely. And it was like a really, like this moment where I think back on it. I was like, okay. And it's like, oh, I trudged up the snowstorm to school. It's kind of one of those cliche stories, but we had to make a decision, be like, okay, well, we got to get to another ATM. It's a couple miles away. Like, buck up, it's not like 20 miles. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it was a moment in my life where I realized, wow, like God really was like right there, got us to the next one. No problem. We got the money we needed. And, it's just, it also makes me realize, that God provides enough, that he provided enough to get the ATM machine. Joke's on us. Wasn't working, right? And so now what are you going to do? You can freak out, say the whole world's crumbling. I have no money. What am I going to do? It's hot out here. We don't have any water. We're going to buy water with them. You know, I mean, just had anything. Had no food, no water, no money. And I was like, oh, well, all the thousands of people I'm living around and helping and witnessing to don't have any money either. They're figuring it out. So we can figure it out too. And so I think I remember just that moment specifically when something maybe goes a little bit off to the side, like could be a lot worse. Mm-hmm. You know, I have money in my bank account, not worried anymore about running out of money and having enough, you know, gas money to get to the next stop. So it's a way to put it in perspective.
Yeah, that's a great way. So for someone listening who loves this industry, mm-hmm. but feels worn out or disconnected, maybe they do have faith, maybe they don't. What would you tell them?
What I would tell them is to find, if they're struggling, right? So they're struggling, things are not going well. I think the first practical thing is to look within, find out, why are you struggling? What's happening? Try to be as practical as you can about it. Write out, you know, what did I do? How was I part of this struggle? Not blaming others for the struggle that you're in, and not just, you know, pointing fingers, to really look within first and foremost. If you have the means, and even if you don't, there are churches and other organizations that have free therapy, resources to go find a therapist. It's like the most incredible, important thing to do that I've done for the last now 5 years plus. And, you know, and just see someone that you can be open with and transparent with and help kind of, you know, talk you down and help you just realize that life isn't so bad, and that to reprioritize. I think it's unbelievably important. And I thank God every day that he came into my life years and years ago when I went to church and got saved, and I was in the industry, right? I was chewed up in that industry, you know, and I thought I was the greatest thing, and, you know, and it really humbled me and brought me down to earth. And, but I think reprioritizing from a practical level, you know, kind of look within, what can I do? How can I make things better? You know, is it as bad? Look towards other people that maybe have it worse, right? And then reprioritizing and saying, I need to bring God into my life. Like, I don't know how else to help somebody that is at their bottom, other than say, hey, like, this is the person, this is the entity, this is the thing that you need to reprioritize your life. Now, just because you bring God into your life, it doesn't mean everything gets solved either. You know, I think understanding that even as Christians, and it's very biblical to say, like, life almost gets worse in some way, or tougher in some ways. But the question is, how much faith do you have? How much have you reprioritized your life to realize, okay, I know this is bad, and I know I'm in a bad place, and I know I don't want to be here anymore. I know I just, you know, can't take it anymore. That if you go, well, that's at your bottom. That's where God wants to meet you. And God wants to bring you back up and prove to you that he is real. Right. And so, I just think that is the best way to look at it. Reprioritize, put God first, find some therapy, whatever order you want to do that, right? And then find a friend, find somebody that you might be dealing with the same thing. Don't get caught up on online social media, right? And like, look for the answer there. Really talking to a person one-on-one, and the right person. Not every therapist is right for everybody. So finding that right person, and then getting involved in your church. I mean, it's like, that sounds like an advertisement, but I mean, I don't know how else to get connected fully with God without having a community of people around you to worship and, you know, come around you, you know. So,
yeah, I heard something recently and it made a lot of sense. It's like the one person who do you listen to the most? Yourself. Mm-hmm. So if you have a lie that you're on repeat, maybe it's about yourself, the situation, or just being let down and just what I deserve. And it just goes on repeat until you break that cycle. And for me, from a personal experience, I mean, it has only been God. I can't watch enough reality TV or go shopping online. You know, even just doing really fun things like spending time with my kids that can feel that, like, you know, turning to God. And there's so many great recovery programs out there that at a lot of churches. So, I mean, we can link some here on the podcast today, but I just really, really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. And I mean, obviously, I think we all need to make sure, because your priorities are reflected in what you do every day. We could say that this is our priorities, that God, family, work, but our actions show that. And I think you've given us some really good tools to go back and look at, reprioritize. So I can't let you go without a confession. So what is your confession today?
Well, we were talking about that earlier, and one of the things you asked me, like, what's my favorite food? I think that is a bit of a confession because, as a chef that sort of touts himself as this creative, innovative guy and done all these different genres of food and all these different menus and everything. And people ask me all the time, do you cook at home? Like, do you cook the most creative stuff? And I said, never, I never cook at home. My wife loves to cook and, but if I had my dream, meal in front of me, it would be either a quarter pounder with cheese from McDonald's, or it'd be like this really thick, super thinly shaved, Virginia ham with American cheese and just regular old mayonnaise, Hellman's mayonnaise with white bread. And that is and then even take it to the next level and kind of toast it like a little bit of grilled cheese sometimes. Oof, that would be like a confession of mine. It's like secret closet eating, as like a chef that's supposed to be, super innovative. It's the food that I love and eat. I would never put on a menu, it would just be like, oh, I would never do that like for somebody outside my house. But, I guess that's a reasonable confession to say.
Yeah, that's a big confession, especially like having eaten a lot of your food at different restaurants. I mean, you would never guess that because your entrees are sick. So in a good way, in a great way.
I try.
So it's amazing. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. And if you guys check out his website, we'll also link that on this podcast. But thank you so much for joining us.
No, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good day. For more inspiration, follow our social media at W3 Sales. Please like, comment, and subscribe. All the things. We would love to connect with you.